Christopher Hitchens, this may not be the proper way to open up one of these programs, but it's the summer, and the president's on Martha's Vineyard. What's on your mind?
I'm waiting to become a father. And I'm wondering how on earth we could have timed things so as to be in the last month of pregnancy in Washington in August. I have to play the sprinklers on my poor wife all the time.
When is your child due?
September 13. So that's the true and correct and full answer. But I'm afraid it's all about me.
Okay, let's then go to the second tier.
Yes.
If we go to politics, what's on your mind?
Oh, I see. Well, I'm obsessed at the moment with Bosnia, and especially with the defense of Sarajevo. And I think people are becoming more and more aware of the fact that where they thought they were staying out of Bosnia, keeping out of the Balkans, in fact, very shamefully, the Western governments have become intervention-minded on the wrong side. They're now the guarantors of the Serbian victory, and they're part of the encirclement of Sarajevo. They've become, with the United Nations forces, actually part of the gendarmerie of the siege. And I think if people understood that they were, in fact, intervening on the wrong side, there could still be outrage, and I hope that there will be.
Pat Buchanan, I'll ask you the same question.
What am I doing when, my question is, what am I doing here, Brian, while he's up at Martha's Vineyard? Our president, I think he picked a pretty posh place to go. On political grounds, I'm not sure it's all that wise to shift from Hollywood out to Martha's Vineyard. But seriously, on what Christopher says on Bosnia, I don't think there's any mood in the United States at all for intervention of any kind. And I think the president has stepped in and stepped out and stepped in again. It's been very, very badly handled by the United States. But I don't think at this late stage there's anything the United States can do, and I don't think there's anything the United States is going to do about Bosnia or about Sarajevo. I think it's over.
Well, as you say, there's no mood for intervention, but I think that's the way people are justifying it to themselves. I think people have an uneasy conscience about it, and they dimly realize that they haven't kept out. They have, in fact, committed themselves to a policy, and that this policy is not neutral by any means. So, by all means, say, the United States and the Balkans should never be mentioned in the same breath, but be consistent. I mean, as it happens, the decision has been made to get involved. So the non-intervention option doesn't exist.
Well, there is a sense in which you're correct. There has been intervention in that we've denied the Bosnians and the Croatians earlier access to Western weapons. At the same time, the Serbs had total access to the Yugoslav weapons, many of which were provided by the West. And so there has been a tilt, unacknowledged and unintended, but clearly a tilt against the Bosnian Muslims by the West. By and large, I think, Christopher, the West wanted it over and done with, and the real problem, in my judgment, is the Europeans themselves, and particularly the Germans. This historically was their area of responsibility, them and the Russians, and the Germans, because of what happened in World War II, are self-intimidated from doing anything, and the Russians, of course, are collapsing, so everyone looks to the faraway Americans, and the Americans have no vital interest there.
You appeared on one of the Sunday shows yesterday?
I was, yeah, I followed my good friend Bob Dole.
Well, you didn't make headlines this morning, but he did.
Look, I made the second part of the story, though, Brian. That's the key.
All right, well, what about this headline, both of you?
I think Bob Dole is clearly looking at 1996, and I think Dole would be a compromise choice for the Republicans. I think he reaches out to both wings of the party, or the many wings of the party right now. And I think he's certainly looking at it, and he could make an interim pope. My guess is that what Bob Dole is doing, and this is a prediction, he'll announce in Iowa that he's going to run for one term.
Well, he said that here.
Oh, he said one term?
One term.
Oh my goodness!
Said this, I've never seen anybody pick up on it. He said it right here. He said, "I will be."
See, I sort of thought it through, and I think that sort of thing, which would try to bring all the Republicans together. We're very, very divided now that the Cold War is over. It hadn't surfaced the divisions. But I think Dole could beat Clinton.
I think practically anyone could beat Clinton, but I think, I don't want to quarrel with Mr. Buchanan about interim popes, which are not my field. But I regard Dole as just another of the members of the permanent Washington government party. I think that would be his disadvantage. He's just one of these guys who's always around and in power, no matter who apparently has won the election, and I would like to think that would tell against him. If I was a Republican, I would be thinking very hard about Mr. Kemp.
You're exactly right about telling against Bob Dole. I do think this, there's nothing you can do about it. He's been here 30-some years. And I think in 1996, the country always sort of looks around to what's new and fresh, and Republicans do as well. And there's nothing he could do. That would be his principal disadvantage.
Let me show you the front page of, speaking of 96. Why are we talking about 96?
You brought it up, Brian.
No, but it's all over the papers.
Oh, it is. Well, Bob Dole spent a week up in Wolfboro, New Hampshire. As he said, he went up there for the fishing. And I think he sort of put a focus on 1996 by so doing.
The front page of the Philadelphia Inquirer has a recognizable gentleman here on the front page with his sunglasses on. 2,000 people were waiting for him at Valley Forge. He had 7 stops over the weekend. He's made 60 speeches this year. Mr. Christopher Hitchens, comment?
Yeah, well, I think he is the sort of the picture of Dorian Gray. Up in the attic, he's always talking about the crazy aunt in the basement. I'm more interested in the mad picture up in the top story. That's what's happening to American politics while no one's looking, is that this is what we see if we look in the mirror, is people who are basically fed up with democracy, don't believe in politics really at all, are still prepared to go for what Mr. Perot, if it was anyone else, would call a quick fix.
One little thing in this story I want to ask you about is that Mother Divine was there at this Valley Forge rally, the wife of Father Divine, and endorsed Mr. Perot. It made the headline here. It said he drew 2,000 people, including Mother Divine. Did you know that Mother Divine was still around?
I did not know Mother Divine was still with us. But I think on Ross Perot, he is the Republicans' principal problem, I think, in terms of recapturing the White House. He helps the Republicans as of 1994 because of the damage he does to Clinton. But by 1996, if he should get into the race, I think he takes Republican votes and he's captured Republican issues. Whatever you say about Ross Perot, I think he's on the popular side and the right side of NAFTA. I think it ought to be defeated, and I think not only for his reasons, but for other reasons. And I think out in the country, Brian, that's what the real energy and fire and passion are for the defeat of NAFTA, not for its passage.
Speaking of NAFTA, now, Jeff Danziger does cartoons for the Christian Science Monitor, and he has a cartoon this morning. It may take me just a little bit to read it, but I want to ask you about this. Well, let me show the audience quickly. It's a quiz. It's a yes-no quiz, and I'm going to drop this so I can read it. I may still have trouble reading it. It's tiny little print. And then what you do is you check off yes or no in these boxes. Now, the first box here is, are you in favor of the North American Free Trade Agreement? Yes or no? And I'd ask you, are you in favor of the North American Free Trade Agreement?
Yeah, I think I am, as a matter of fact.
Are you?
No, it's not a free trade agreement. It's a farce. It's New World Order.
All right, second box. Wait a minute, we'll get back to all this substance. Second box is, have you actually read the North American Free Trade Agreement?
No, but I have read excerpts from it. It is almost between 1,000 and 2,000 pages long, and when you add the side agreements, it's even longer. I've had a friend call to get a copy of it, Brian, and he found out that I think you have to pay $500 to get it, and only the John Birch Society has thus far purchased a copy, and they are not amused by the North American Free Trade Agreement.
There is a fellow, and I was listening to the radio when I was out in the Midwest, by the name of Chuck Harper, who has a call-in show, national call-in show, and I think it was, I'm not sure he's on religious stations, but I was listening to a religious station where he was on when I was out there, and he said they sell it for something like $21.95, and they're selling it under the government price. So there is a movement out there somewhere.
That's true of a lot of important documents these days, by the way. For example, the very important report of the Truth Commission in El Salvador, which implicates United States policy from way back and to high up. It's almost impossible to get hold of a copy in translation.
Can I go on to
I haven't read the Treaty of Rome either, I should say. Well, it's my turn.
Well,
but I mean, I'm in favour. But I'm in favour of a common market in Europe. If I'm not in favour of this free trade agreement, I'm in favour of a North American common market.
You're in favour of Maastricht for the British?
Well, This is our
Maastricht.
I'm certainly anti-Thatcherite on Maastricht. I think yes.
Well, I'm a Thatcherite on Maastricht, and that's what this is. This is a Maastricht for North America, Brian. It's a free trade agreement would take
better already.
A free trade agreement would take you two paragraphs to write. The tariffs are gone and the quotas are gone. All these pages, what this is managed trade, cartelized trade. The treaty supersedes state laws. It invades American sovereignty. You got trinational commissions invading businesses with the right to fine the United States government $20 million per offense, with the fines rising. I mean, this is New World Order. Henry Kissinger has said as much, and that's what's going to kill it, I think, because Republicans, when they find that out, they'll break with it on those terms, because what they think it is now is free trade, and it's not.
Jeff Danziger, by the way, his third box. The second one was, have you actually read the treaty? His third box is, if not, do you know anyone who's actually read the North American Free Trade Agreement?
Yes. I think I want to the one I've been quoting is James Sheehan of Competitive Enterprise Institute, and we're trying to get copies out at my foundation, American Cause.
Yes, I'm pretty sure that Nathan Gardell's the editor of New Perspectives Quarterly, which is a very fine magazine in California, has read it, and they've also conducted some very excellent interviews from both Canada, Mexico, and the US on the pros and cons of this. And they take a radical free trade position, which I think has been left out of the argument.
You'll see
the radical free traders, are they... I mean, I know Murray Rothbard's a friend of mine, Lou Rockwell. Radical free traders would take away all barriers, militantly opposed to this treaty.
By the way, there are 2 more boxes, and you'll see the attempted humor on the part of Jeff Danziger. His next box is, if you don't know anybody who knows someone who has read the treaty, do you know someone who knows someone who knows someone who has actually read the treaty? The point being is that Jeff Danziger doesn't think anybody's read this.
Do you know Mickey Canner? He probably hasn't read it either.
Do you think this is fluid, the vote count on this? Is it?
I think it is very fluid. I think that some Democrats who are now against it, I think Mr. Clinton will be able to purchase the way he did on his tax bill, and many Republicans who are now for it as sort of a general proposition that it's free trade, I think will break against it. I think it's going to go down to defeat.
I think that the confusion between free trade as a platonic idea and this free trade agreement will probably tell against this agreement, sure.
Both of you are doing lots. I hesitate to show this cover because, for obvious reasons.
I wouldn't hesitate.
It's not a political cover. What's in it that you have to do with?
My column, which is called Cultural Elite, this month, is about Hillary Clinton and the politics of meaning. It's about the rather bizarre correspondence that's been going on between her and a guy called Michael Lerner, a very bright guy who edits a magazine called Tikkun, which is a Jewish liberal magazine. And investigating the Clintons' search for a catchphrase to describe their administration. So the politics of meaning, which is Lerner's slogan, might possibly become it, but I don't think it will.
It sort of backfired, did it not? I mean, there was a couple of months ago, there was a number of columns on Hillary and the relationship, and Lerner got himself in a bit of trouble back here in D.C.
Well, Lerner's been attacked in the press a lot for trying to make too much of the relationship, and I don't know if it's true that he's been dumped. Some people say the White House doesn't take his calls anymore. But and anyway, the White House is notoriously fickle to anyone who has ever tried to be its friend, as many people can testify.
Did you talk to Michael Lerner?
Sure, yeah.
What is the politics of meaning?
Well, the idea is that materialism and self-interest are such strong forces already in the country and in the society that they barely need state and government endorsement, and that what a more spiritual politics would mean, these are not my words but Mr. Lerner's, would involve government support for more altruistic behavior. For example, people who do voluntary work should be honored more than they are. People who do boring work, blue-collar work, should be honored more than they are. People who are raising families in difficult conditions, including non-classic nuclear families, should be honored and supported more than they are.
You agree with that?
Fairly bland in a way, where the idea of solidarity and the common good would be more of a theme than the lone individual struggling away.
What do you think of this?
Well, as it's described there, it's, I think there's some very valid points. There are a lot of people who do tremendous work and are certainly not rewarded financially, as well as, say, a rookie shortstop for the Detroit Tigers. And that's fair enough, but I think it would be a terrible mistake to get government in the business of trying to reallocate the rewards in society, especially the economic rewards. That's the back door to the socialism some of us have opposed.
Yes, but it's also a way of stopping well short of it, I think. If you really want to be cynical about it, if you don't intend to redistribute the wealth, as I'm sure Mr. Clinton does not, and hasn't got a socialist bone in his body, then why not indeed go around giving people lectures on why aren't you more spiritual and less materialistic? I think the working class is very right to be materialistic.
That's not the
I think they're often not materialistic enough.
That's not the business of Bill and Hillary Clinton and the cadres they brought to Washington to find meaning in my life. Look up to the White House. I don't think so, and I think most people have other ways to find meaning in their life than looking to government or politics at all.
It's interesting, though, because we mentioned Martha's Vineyard earlier. I interpret Martha's Vineyard as yet another attempt by Clinton to make himself subliminally reminiscent of JFK. And unlike Kennedy, he hasn't yet found a slogan to campaign on.
Here's a picture, speaking of Martha's Vineyard, of the president and Vernon Jordan out on the golf links. Any comment?
I didn't know. I've been to Martha's Vineyard once, and I did not know there was a golf course on the island.
I think there's more than one.
Yeah.
There's another picture of the president. What do you think of this man?
What do I think of Clinton? I think Clinton is a man who's trying very, very hard to be liked. I think he's probably a good individual in the sense that I don't think he's ruthless or mean, but I think he adheres to a lot of ideas that belong to the 1960s and really have no relevance to our time. And I think he's trying to impose these on society, and I think it's going to backfire.
This is a picture of the president with two young ladies that are meeting the president for the first time. Mr. Hitchens, your comment on President Clinton?
Oh, come on. I've already made all the flesh-pressing jokes about Clinton that I can think of. If you want, I think there's something completely hollow at the very center of the guy. Needing to be liked doesn't quite cover it. I mean, he has an absolute desperate need to be loved and approved of, which I think is a bad sign in an individual, very bad sign in a politician.
I think there is a hollowness at the core also. I mean, this is why else search for the politics of meaning? I mean, Hillary Clinton's a very bright woman, and Bill Clinton, they're both very well educated.
Well, that's just a search for a slogan. I mean, he tried the New Covenant, if you remember, at the convention. That didn't fly. He hasn't come up with any sort of defining great society or new frontier or morning in America, you should excuse the expression, thing yet. And I think perhaps for a while he thought politics of meaning might do it.
Deaver had a core at the center, Chris. Morning in America.
You know, it's already apparent to me that you two don't differ a great deal on President Clinton. At least I don't hear much support from either one of you. Is that right?
Because I can't think of anything I support.
Okay, we're going to have to shift gears in on the audience because I can hear the Clintonites out there on the ceiling right now saying, there they go again. We're going to have to switch things on these numbers this morning. Let's set up the numbers so that we can make the West Coast number pro-Clinton folks so that we can give them a chance to, we'll show you the numbers on the screen, and it'll upset the people that are now getting a ringing sound, but that won't last long anyway with the way the telephone company cuts you off after 40 rings. So complicated, but the West Coast number for Bill Clinton, the East Coast number against Bill Clinton, or anything but for Bill Clinton, and we'll make sure that we hear a lot of you out there that are in favor of the president. What else are you doing? You got a radio show every day?
Chris Hitchens and I are he's going to co-host the show with me today. It's the Mutual Broadcasting System.
How many hours of exposure are you going to get on a national basis today? There'll be an hour and a half here.
And we'll do the 3 hours on the radio.
It's 4.5 hours.
We did the column, and then you do Crossfire tonight.
And are you still permanently attached to Crossfire?
Yes, I am. I do it, excuse me, every other week. John Sununu sits in my chair on opposite weeks. And we're just in 7 weeks into the radio show in Mutual, but it's doing very well. We've got 122 stations around the country.
You have a book.
So I do.
What is this book?
It's a collection of my stuff. It's a vanity book, really.
What does that mean?
It means reprinted, collected, my favorite stuff of myself. I mean, sort of just an exercise in conceit, but it's called For the Sake of Argument. It sticks up for the smokers and drinkers of the country. That's why the cover is such a sort of debauch. It's a record of the Reagan era, with all the criticisms I had of that and of the Bush period, and some warnings about Clinton, and then some literary stuff and some foreign reporting, mainly from the Balkans and from Kurdistan.
What happened to the book?
And it's a bargain at whatever they sell it for.
This book?
Yeah, and at fine bookstores everywhere.
It doesn't have a price on it.
No, I think that's ominous, don't you? I think they'll take, probably, if you go to a bookstore, they'll take whatever you offer for it, yeah.
Your book? Did you?
I wrote it and almost finished it, and this was in March before we went back on Crossfire and back to the column, and I haven't decided whether I'm going to go ahead with it or not.
Really?
Yeah, because, well, there's a lot of things in there that you go back and it tears off some bandages back in the campaign of 1992, and I'm not sure that I want to do that right now. I've got it on the record, and I have an offer, and I'm considering whether or not to go ahead with it.
Tears off some bandages, meaning even criticism of your own party?
Oh, I'll say yes, and that's where it is. And it's in the conservative movement and the Republican Party, both.
Bob Novak has a column this morning, by the way, that says that there's a real split in the Republican Party and no one quite knows what they are. And if Bob Michael, I don't know if many of you saw Bob Michael's comments last week to the Peoria.
Did, yeah.
What was your reaction to that?
Well, he said he saw the Republicans as never more partisan and militantly partisan toward the Democrats and Clinton as they are right now. And I think that's not Bob Michael's cup of tea. And I think he left the impression that he may not run again for minority leader, and may not even run again in 1994. I think he's very right about the militancy among Republicans. I don't take that necessarily as a bad thing. I didn't see Bob Novak's column this morning, but Brian, that is the truth. If you take issues like the cultural war, immigration, illegal immigration, interventionism in Bosnia and abroad, free NAFTA, Republicans are all over the lot. Their only unifying force they've got right now is opposition to Clinton, especially on taxes.
Let me tell our audience once again, because of the situation with our two guests, you never quite know before people get here exactly how they feel. We've got a line that going to be set up that those of you who are pro-Bill Clinton or in favor of this president, like what he has to say, we're going to have a line set aside so you can call up and get into this and defend him and tell us what you think and get the positive side of this.
I should say that I was really crushed by Mr. Buchanan's last book, because I used to go around saying, Pat Buchanan, the only people he likes, seems to me are General Franco, Joe McCarthy, and Colonel Spellman. And then in his book, it opens by saying, these are the only three heroes I've ever really had, so I had to stop saying all this.
Douglas MacArthur was in there.
Douglas MacArthur, I should have remembered.
Today's U.S. News and World Report has case closed, two familiar faces on the cover, and also, and this is about documents coming out
today.
There's no blockbuster headline in this, and I haven't had time to read
Are these the documents that Oliver Stone got the Congress to disgorge?
I believe they are.
It's 100,000 pages, CIA.
But the reason I show you that cover is that there's John Kennedy on the cover. Here it is 30 years later. And then the Washington Post decided today to do this. Here's a picture of Bill Clinton and John Kennedy, and they basically say that because at this Boys Nation event in the Rose Garden that started his career and got him excited about politics, they look at what's happened here in the last 30 years to government, and you can see those. You all can see those better than I can. Let's start up here at the top. Can you read it? Can you read that?
Can't read it from here, no.
Yes, the government spends a smaller proportion of economic output on the military.
Okay, this is the line
Doesn't
from
feel like that
63, and it goes all the way over.
The spending on the military has been cut in half. I think it was about 9% under Kennedy, and it's about 5% now.
Now, what's this one?
That is probably, I can't read it, but that's
more to domestic spending. It's mandatory social spending.
Mandatory special social spending
as a GDP.
It's almost tripled.
These are constant dollars, by the way, and $63.
It's almost, I think it's a share of gross national product.
Social Security payments?
Of course, it's soared. It's soared.
Up here. Let's go down here to this one. Let's see. Well, the government has taken on increasing burden of maintaining incomes.
That's, income transfers, I guess.
And one last one down here. In the midst of these changes, the federal debt has exploded, and you can see what's happened.
And that's in real terms, is it? Real dollars?
Yes.
That's almost eightfold, I think.
And it goes on to say, when JFK died, trust in government soared. After years of war, Watergate, and dampening economy, Clinton faced a skeptical public. Look at this one up here. This is where people's faith in government has gone down.
That's a key. I think you have to put the Kennedy-Eisenhower terms almost together. And when you do, I think there was enthusiasm about government. There was belief, especially in Eisenhower's era and in the early Kennedy era. And I think that's true. The Vietnam War, the adversary journalism, the Watergate affair, all the rest of it.
What do you think of the comparison?
I hope the other figures are more accurate than that one. I mean, because I can't believe that 78% of Americans ever really said, yes, I trust the federal government most of the time. I mean, it's an un-American thing to say. People aren't really like that. People are more skeptical. It is true that having been lied into a war, principally by Kennedy, as a matter of fact, in Vietnam, and lied to about it all the way through by Johnson and Nixon, that people began to look more skeptically at the government. But I would say that's a very positive finding, that automatic trust in the word of the state, axiomatic trust in the word of the state has gone down. That should be a positive statistic. I just wish it was true.
Well, there's no doubt you can trace it back to Vietnam and the length of the war. I think it's a great myth to say that we were lied into the war. I was writing editorials in St. Louis before Kennedy died for a year and a half.
I was thinking of
you were thinking of some of my writings. Yeah. But back in 62 and 63, we were writing not only weekly, but several times a week about Vietnam. And it was widely debated in this country, the wisdom of going in there. Clearly, the Tonkin Gulf episode was there was a lot of malarkey, and it was a lot of malarkey involved. But I mean, the idea that America somehow slipped into that war is nonsense. When, as for Richard Nixon, when we got in the White House in 1969, we'd been at war basically for about 5 years.
But if you go to the Vietnam Memorial and look at the names, you'll see that the earliest ones appear in the mid-50s, when General Lansdale was running a covert operation in Vietnam that no one was ever allowed to argue about. But Americans were being killed in support of the French Empire's attempt to partition and repress Vietnam. And there was no one was ever consulted about that.
I don't know how you could repress North Vietnam any more than it was repressing its own people.
Well, the French were really working on that.
A couple of quick things before we go to the phones. This is a McNelly cartoon today. You can see the bumper sticker says, "Annoyed with Clinton, retroactive to January 1st." A takeoff on the retroactivity of the tax.
You know, I think if there's three things, or there's several things that conservatives, I think the retroactivity feature of the tax bill could well be repealed. I heard that Democratic Senator from, I think, Conrad Burns was denouncing it, calling for a constitutional amendment. I'll bet if they put that up for a vote, the retroactivity feature will be repealed.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you.
That will help you out from all the income from that book, Chris.
I love all the Democrats who I meet. I just want to know, what was all this about a middle-class tax cut? I mean, it wasn't my idea, but it was Clinton's. And the other day he had the nerve to say that during the whole campaign he never heard anyone even talking about a middle-class tax cut. Well, nor did I, except for him. Every day, several times.
Again, tell the audience that we want to hear from the pro-Clinton folks. We'll give you plenty of time to respond. I know past his prologue, you're hot right now, wondering why we don't have somebody here defending the president strongly, and that's just one of those things that happens. It's not on purpose. Yesterday's New York Times, portrait of a White House aide ensnared by his own perfection. This is a long takeout. Either one of you read it on...
Perfectionism, I think.
I'm sorry, perfectionism, thank you.
I didn't read that, but I did read the takeout a week ago. I believe it was on in the Washington Post, which I thought was very well done.
Is it worth a front page New York Times?
No, absolutely not.
Why not? I think it's done. I think it's over.
Yeah, it's extraordinary to me the amount of attention that's been given to this guy. He wanted the job. Okay, he'd been a long-term political crony of the president. He's been used as a huge excuse in self-pity and introspection all across the town, as if Washington was too hard on the permanent government, as if people who work in the White House have a hard time working on all our behalves. The absolute opposite is the case. It's a very lenient town on people in power.
Let me ask you both quickly about this. I've taken a yellow pen to show how many times the Wall Street Journal is mentioned in this piece. And it's all about let me hold it up here a little bit farther. Yeah, it's all about how those editorials might have had an impact.
I think that is really a cheap shot on the Wall Street Journal. Clearly the Wall Street Journal was picking up on the whole issue of the Rose Law Firm, but Webb Hubbell and Bernie Nussbaum got worked over far more than Vincent Foster. I didn't know who Vincent Foster was when you read that he took his own life. I'll bet most of the journalists in this town didn't know who he was. There's something in that individual's own personal psyche that caused him to drive up to Fort Marcy Park rather than just quit and go home. I mean, he had a nice, wonderful family. He was not hit that hard. He was brushed. He didn't get the treatment that our good friend Ed Meese has gotten in this town, or a John Sununu.
Well, he didn't deserve what Ed Meese deserves. Ed Meese is very lucky indeed to have got away with what he got away with.
Chris has a
quite extraordinary. No, look, I mean, G.K. Chesterton used to say that the job of journalism was to tell the public Lord X is dead when they never knew Lord X had been alive. And I think that is very often true of these power brokers. But I think it was the Wall Street Journal, though it's a vicious paper in many ways, was perfectly entitled to investigate the cronyism of Clinton's system in Arkansas.
Our two guests this morning, Christopher Hitchens, who writes for the Vanity Fair, has a book out and does a lot of other writing, and Pat Buchanan, who you see on Crossfire, has his own radio show on the Mutual Broadcasting Network.
Mutual Broadcasting System. Westwood One.
MBS. And it's time for the phones. Our first caller is from Houston, Texas. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I have two questions for Pat, please, sort of neutral questions. In retrospect, Pat, would you deliver the same speech that you delivered to the Republican convention again and in the same manner? And number two, here in Houston, your radio show is in directly opposite Rush Limbaugh's show. What do you think of that?
Let me ask you first, though, caller. What did you think of Pat Buchanan's speech at that convention?
I agreed with the critics.
Which critics?
What's that?
Which critics?
The critics that said it was sort of mean-spirited and not really catching the. It made a lot of people angry.
Now, what do you think? Which program do you choose to listen to, the Rush Limbaugh Show or the Pat Buchanan Show?
Well, I am now a listener of Limbaugh Show, mainly to disagree with him. He makes me angry, and I listen mostly as I drive to work. They play Limbaugh from 5 to 7 on the station that I listen to. Again, they play him 3 times a day, and I listen as I go to work in the morning, and it really hypes me up as I go to work.
So you don't need any caffeine in your coffee?
No.
Thank you for your call, Mr. Buchanan.
Well, the speech as delivered, when it was delivered that night, the combination of that night, George Bush rose 10 points in the polls, the night of the Buchanan-Reagan speeches. I see Chris smiling over here. And actually, when George Bush got up to speak on that Thursday night of his convention, according to ABC, he was only 2 points behind, and he'd been 25 points behind several weeks before. Now, there's no doubt that subsequent to the convention, the media has trashed that address week in, week out, day in, day out. It's become one of the most famous addresses, and I had not anticipated it would be.
Really did not anticipate?
Oh, I thought it was a good speech. It was a strong speech endorsing Bush. It did everything the Bush people asked me to do in the speech. They saw it beforehand. No one thought it would have the impact that it did.
Would you do it again?
Oh, yes, I would do it again. Would you change some words? Perhaps so. Maybe you'd have something more... some change at the end. But the point is that I think what caused this great collision is the fact that it hit a core of truth. There is a cultural war going on in this country for the soul of America, and I took a stand for our side, and the vast majority of the national press are on the other side of these moral, cultural, social issues.
Better grab some calls. We haven't heard from our audience. Champaign, Illinois. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Hi.
You have the conservatives, the fundamentalists, Ross Perot and would-be Republicans wanting to be president. It's no wonder the propaganda machine is out in full force. And yes, I forgot to mention the fat guy, whose program is incidentally produced by Roger Ailes, the Republican image maker. And you, Mr. Hitchens, seem to be the past year gradually going toward the right. Do you want to ingratiate yourself with the conservatives? Good morning.
Well, man, are you there? I want really looking for pro-Bill Clinton calls, but anyway, go ahead.
I think that's pro-Bill Clinton.
I think I took that as a pro-Clinton call, but she certainly knows how to hurt somebody. I guess what she means by it is that I'm not very much fonder of the president than...
Are you a socialist still?
Yeah, I would never disown that accusation, as it's sometimes made, in whatever tone of voice it came, and I've often taken the opportunity to reaffirm it. I think the fact is, people are Democrats. I mean, some of them completely incurable. All they can ever say to you is, well, considering the alternative, and what I want to say to them is, the alternative is what you ought to be considering, because otherwise, if you stay on the two-party pendulum, the only alternative will indeed be the extreme right.
Let me talk about Rush a minute, because she brought him up again. I think Rush is partly responsible for the problems Bill Clinton has today. I mean, he has an enormous audience, 20 million a week. He provides a certain amount of, he provides entertainment value. But what he does is he gives people out there at the grassroots, many of whom are Democrats, confidence in their own convictions. He persuades them they were conservatives. It's his show that's the reason my show is on the air. Mutual wanted something to go opposite Rush Limbaugh, who's got the nation saturated with 650 stations. And I think Rush has done a phenomenal job for the movement. And I think, again, just as I think a lot of women moved to the left and away from the Republican Party as a consequence of the Phil Donahues and watching all those shows in the morning, I think Rush is responsible for some of Clinton's problems.
Well, Clinton was moving to the right from the New Hampshire primary onwards. In fact, has been moving to the right since the mid-'80s, and taking a lot of Democrats with him who don't realize that's where he's been taking them. The Limbaugh phenomenon, I think, is self-contained. I must say, love him or hate him, I can't listen to him. I can't watch him. I don't understand what the fascination is. But I was standing in a hospitality room not long ago where 2 Democratic senators were waiting to go on the air, and all they were talking about was, what are we going to do about this guy? He's put the fear of Christ into the Democrats. So I think that shows how feeble they are.
You know, they are moving, there's a move on the Hill to try to write the fairness doctrine into law. I think it was dumped during the Reagan years, and because they're Rush alone, 3 hours a day, is too much for them to handle. I think they want to get somebody on to balance.
I want to ask both of you, where are the liberals on radio? Let's go to Morehead City, North Carolina. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Brian.
Hi.
Pat. And
Hi.
so forth.
So forth, yes. I know what you mean now. It's perfectly all right.
Christopher Hitchens.
No, please, you just leave me twisting.
So forth. I like that.
So forth, yeah.
I remembered Pat.
Or whatever.
I wanted to vote for him. And being he didn't finish running, I voted for Perot. But there's two things that I want to bring up, and that's the Trilateral Commission and Senator Kerry. Okay, now first, Pat, explain to Brian about the Trilateral, because every time we call, the guests that are on there deny that it even exists. We've had two presidents so far, and that was Carter and his vice president, and then we had Bush. Now, Bush, he could have made a good president, but he like Carter, was a tool of the Trilateral Commission. And then, so far as Senator Kerry goes, see, we can only call in once in a month, so I have to wait to say this.
Caller, which Kerry?
Senator Kerry.
Well, I know there are two.
Nebraska.
Nebraska.
From
Senator Bob
Nebraska.
Kerry. Okay.
All right, when he got up and gave his speech, I thought if I could only get through to Brian. That man, I expected him any minute to click his heels and say Heil. I mean, he forgets that he took, just like everybody else up there, they swore to uphold our Constitution, not the Trilateral.
All right. Thanks for the call.
The Führer principle. Huh?
Trilateral.
The Trilateral Commission, of course, is David Rockefeller's organization. It's sort of an extract out of the Council on Foreign Relations.
Are you a member?
No, I've never been invited, Brian, not even to a meeting. I think the woman has a valid point. There is, to me, sort of a supranational establishment in this country that really would like to see the United States of America and Europe and Japan sort of merge as the core of a new world order in which American sovereignty is diminished and America's freedom of action is circumscribed, and individuals who are much more comfortable flying to Paris or Rome or Tokyo than they would be in Boise, Idaho, or St. Louis, Missouri. It is a bipartisan establishment that includes members of both parties, the elites of both parties. You will find it 100% behind NAFTA, 100% for globalism, 100% for interventionism, and I don't think it represents the core of America, which is populist and conservative. And I think the woman has a valid point.
Are you a member?
No, I'm not, but I would be thrilled to be invited to some of its meetings. I have to be brisk, I think, and rude and say that I've always found people who go on about the Trilateral Commission are infallibly prone to paranoia. It is, of course, the case that there is a ruling class in this country and that it has allies internationally. And that can be analysed out in the open. You can read its proceedings in the Wall Street Journal and so forth. The people who believe that there's some sort of hidden cabal of Rockefellers and Wall Streeters and so on are always just short of saying that it's the protocols of the Elders of Zion, it seems to me.
Little Rock, Arkansas.
Good morning.
Good morning. How do you feel about the president?
Well, I'm from Little Rock, and I don't like him. I don't have didn't have a use for him while he was here, and still don't. But Brian,
You're calling on the wrong line, sir.
I know I am, but let me explain to you why it is, Brian. This morning, I guess you've already instituted the fairness doctrine. I saw you do this the other day when you did these phone numbers. You know, it's like you think that everything has got to be devised to be fair. I mean, everybody's phone is the same. I've been dialing in for 8 months trying to get in.
No, I don't think that at all. I mean, first of all, this is supposed to be a balanced program here, and as you see, we have two gentlemen that are not in favor of the president. That's not their fault. That's our fault.
Well,
so we try to make sure that we hear people who are in favor. And I'm not going to let you stay because you did a couple things wrong, including calling on the wrong line twice because Little Rock calls in on the other line. It's called Walnut Creek, California. Go ahead, please. You're on the air.
Yeah, I'm on the air. Thank you.
Are you in favor of the president?
Yes, I'm in favor of the president.
All right, good. Let's hear why.
Like that guy, and you're right tremendously, that Pat Buchanan. I think he stinks.
All right.
I can never
want to
stand him
elaborate on that a little bit?
I can't stand him on Crossfire. When he's on there, he just turns my stomach up, along with that fat guy in some other program.
All right, let's hold it there, and let me ask you about the president. You tell us all now why you like the president and what you think of the job he's doing.
Well, I'm anti-Republican. I don't think the Republicans have ever done anything good for this country. I'm not sure that I like everything of the president, but I'm so much better than Republicans. Every place I go in California, the rich have got richer. They got all their big yachts and big homes and that. I work in every Friday I work in a place to feed the homeless. Last Friday we served 345 in Pittsburgh, California, a very little place. The poor are getting worse all the time, Pat. You gotta come out and visit us, how some of the people are living. They're on rock bottom, Pat.
I know they are.
I'm retired and I'm trying to help.
Well, good for you, but I know they're on rock.
You are.
Well, I know they're on rock bottom, and I spent a lot of time in New Hampshire a year and a half ago, and that state was in far tougher straits than I've ever seen any American state. Visited in the campaign, and you're doing a good job if you're feeding the homeless. But my friend, I don't think Clinton's. I mean, you talk about the big yachts. We put a big luxury tax on those in 1990. And after doing that, I went down to Bywater Boats down in Georgia, and you found out all the workers down there, they were building one boat where they used to build 12 a year. And these kinds of taxes and things don't create jobs. Nobody's ever taxed themselves into prosperity.
Caller, what do you like? Tell us what you like about the president, please.
Why did they raise the taxes? The Republicans raised the taxes on their little man last time. You lowered them from 70 to 28. Yes, you did. You lowered them from 70 to 28 on the rich, and you raised them for mine from 10 to 15. Plus, I couldn't deduct a lot of other stuff. So my taxes doubled, Pat, and I only made around $20,000 a year. But my taxes doubled.
No, the 6 million in the Bill of '86, 6 million poor were dropped off the tax rolls, and excuse me, but Tip O'Neill said it was the most progressive piece of legislation he had ever seen come through the Congress. But I agree, there were a lot of things wrong with that '86 bill, some of the real estate provisions and others, which I think were damaging to the economy, and those of us who are behind it have to take responsibility.
Comment, sir.
I always want to ask people who are Democrats like that, i.e. people who simply say, I'm a Democrat, I don't like the Republicans, how they explain, if things are so bad, that the Democrats have controlled Congress for most of the post-war period. And what they think about Mr. Clinton hiring David Gergen, who was the guy who sold the Reagan budgets to a credulous press and a reluctant electorate and a gullible Congress, as his public face for his administration. I think until people work out that there is a one-party system in Washington,
I think
they're going to carry on making slight fools of themselves when they call into shows like this, because they really do believe that there's a partisan fight on the Hill, and that you have to take one side or another, and it just isn't so.
I think that that you saw in 1991-92 in the election in Pennsylvania, Harris Wofford, when they in effect rejected the establishment Republican candidate, you know, the corridors of power fellow, in our campaign in New Hampshire, even in some of David Duke's, just a rejection of the establishment in Louisiana, in Terry Brown's campaign, and certainly in Perot's campaigns, you've got manifestations of just what you're talking about. The American people are fed up with Washington. They don't trust Washington. You saw Bryan's poll. They don't believe in the establishment of either party. I think you mentioned Bob Dole, this will be his most difficult problem in 1996. This country is ready for something new. And I think Ross Perot is now the man who's riding the crest of that wave, but others could.
Let's go to Santa Fe, and this should be a pro-Bill Clinton call.
Well, it is, and I am a Republican. I'd like to point out to the pompous gentleman there who was talking about deficits and debt and government spending. If we would have continued at the rate of increase in yearly revenues into the federal government that we were going at, which was about 5%, instead of the rapid doubling of revenues we had in the last 12 years, these deficits would be worse, because the Great Society, Great Debt programs were instituted. They were mandated spending. So when you want to blame Republicans for breaking the bank, keep in mind who instituted all of these programs that have failed miserably. The reason I'm pro-Clinton is because the American people have this real, they're very docile and passive. They need a problem to get out of hand before they do anything about it. And the best thing to do is put a liberal in the White House, have a liberal Congress, and just let him go for it. And he'll be just like Jimmy Carter. He'll do more for the Republican Party. We'll have 3 Republican presidents after this. And it just seems to me that the Democratic Party the Republicans should keep score. I mean, ever since the Civil War, the Democrats have been on the wrong side of virtually every issue. And
so, Carter, you're really saying you're for Bill Clinton because it helps the Republicans?
After them, us.
Well, it seems to me that we can see what is happening. I mean, school choice is the next thing the Democrats are wrong about, whether it's Vietnam, slavery, Great Society program.
Again, I'm going to let you go. This is a very frustrating morning for me. I cannot get this thing balanced.
I wonder if Mr. Gergen is watching.
I think he's playing
we are
golf.
trying to find the president's fans.
But you know, you saw that.
I think you're overdoing it, by the way. After all, here's a guy who, like all presidents, has a huge publicity machine run for him, as far as I think, by taxpayers' expense. Has a huge spin doctor system run out of the White House. I don't see why one needs to keep on being fair to people who are in power. Do you want to give up the hunt, or shall we try for one more?
We're going to try for many more.
California, did you see the field poll over the weekend? I think it was something like
yes, the
27% felt he did an excellent or good job, and it was the lowest rating of any president at this period in his presidency. Since Field's been taking polls, and of course he tilts a little bit toward Democrats, the field poll does, I think. And Clinton's in terrible trouble in the one state he's got to have to win.
Bob Novak, I'm looking for the column here this morning, suggests, though, that because of where he is and because of the way the Republican Party is, that he will come right down the middle and go back in.
If you get Perot in the race, it could very well happen.
Can you see Ross Perot as a Republican?
I certainly can. If you get 6 or 7 people running and Ross Perot gets his organization ginned up in Iowa and New Hampshire, I can see him, everybody else out of money.
Let's try one more. New York City.
Here you go.
Hi.
Hi. Are you pro Bill Clinton?
Yes, I am.
All right. Tell us why.
Okay, you know, he seems to be trying.
Very trying.
You know,
You're a very nice lady.
I don't know. I've never, you know, Bush, he never talked about what he was doing, it didn't seem. I can't hear with this TV, I'm sorry.
Can you turn your television? Just click on the
I'm
mute
gonna do
there.
that. Hold on.
Punch the mute button.
Thanks. I don't know. He just seems to really care about what he's doing, whereas Bush, I thought, or Reagan, they seem to be more interested in their image or what they were going to be doing after they're gone.
Did you vote for him?
Pardon?
Did you vote for him?
Yeah.
And do you like basically what you've seen him do the first part of this year?
Well, you know, there's a lot of problems, but I don't know. He seems to be trying to do the best he can. You know, we could go on, you know, with
Well, I think he is.
hearing all the, like, really nice stuff, and everything's fine. You know, run up this huge debt, and my generation can pay for it, and you don't really have to address anything.
How old are you?
25.
25. Do you listen to Rush Limbaugh or Pat Buchanan on the radio?
Not Rush. I mean, I try to listen to Rush Limbaugh every once in a while to find out kind of what, you know, where he's coming from.
Where do you get your information then about things that you like to know about and the things you agree with? Who do you agree with in the media?
Actually, I don't know who to trust, you know. I just watch CNN. I try and get as much possible information all together.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was sort of more talking about the general image that they present.
Okay. Thank you.
I think he is. She said he's well-intentioned, and he's trying to do his best. I think that has come through. I really do. I mean, I think he's extremely earnest. I think he wants to do what's best for the country as he sees it. I just think he's a prisoner of a lot of old ideas, despite the New Democrat, which was a put-on. And I agree with what Chris said earlier. I don't think there's any inner core, and the idea that this tax thing is going to work is nope.
Said my piece on that. I mean, it makes me sad when I hear people like the previous caller, because, you know, these people, they look for sincerity in politicians. That's looking for it in the wrong place. People should do their own thinking. I mean, it used to depress me terribly during the campaign. You would hear people say, well, I'm going to vote for Clinton. And I'd say, well, why is that? And they'd say, well, because it's time for a change. And I would say, did you make that up all by yourself, or did you hear it somewhere? People are actually regurgitating, you know, slogans. I just think people have to realize that if they put their trust in anyone in this way, they are inviting disappointment.
But, you know, those slogans are thought up by the spin doctors in response to focus groups, and people are telling them, well, let's have a change in there. Let's throw these fellows out.
Sure,
they say, okay, let's just feed a line right into this.
In a way, it's
sentiment.
a playback, but it still that doesn't make it any less depressing to me, actually.
Let's go to Silver Spring, Maryland. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thanks for letting me call. I'm not either pro or anti-Clinton, but I am confused as to what's liberal and what's conservative. Here we got two people, one a socialist and the other a right-wing conservative, and they seem to agree on an awful lot of things. You know, I thought conservatism are people who felt that they wanted less government interference. Mm-hmm. And yet I see a lot of things that the so-called conservatives want require more government interference.
Let's take an issue that means a lot to you. Give us one thing that means, what's the most important issue in your opinion?
Tax balance and that sort of thing. The rate of taxation and the equity of taxation means an awful lot to me.
All right, let's just ask both gentlemen here. Let me start with Christopher Hitchens. Sure. What should the tax rate be for? Should it be progressive, and at what rate?
First, I just want to say I don't think Mr. Buchanan and I have agreed on anything so far. It's the deceptive good manners of this show, sir, that I think may give you that impression. We haven't agreed on anything except that we don't think very highly of the President's character. Second, I think the argument about marginal and progressive tax rates is largely phony, because I think it's politically true that people who would willingly pay more money if they thought the money was going to the alleged cause or problem or location do not trust the people who raise the money. In other words, they don't believe that the object to which the taxes are raised is the object to which they will be devoted. And I think while that's true, and I have every sympathy with people who suspect that it is, the argument about the rates will be obliterated by all the arguments about the loopholes. And everybody knows that people who are well off can afford to pretty much set their own tax rate.
Mr. Buchanan?
I agree with the caller to this extent. I think that people should not be taxed. If you could, ideal system, they would not be taxed on what are the necessities of life for them and their family, sort of a family tax rate. And then above that, I would have a flat tax all the way down the line until you get to the very wealthy who have enormous discretionary income, and maybe something on top of that, because you have to have you got to compensate for what you can get through the Congress. And I would get rid of all the deductions, and except for the family exemptions across the board.
So you like the surtax?
I would have a sort of a zero rate up to a certain level, say $12,000 for a family of 4, then a flat tax of 10% up to a couple $100,000, then a tax rate of 20% all the way above that. Get rid of all the forms and all the deductions and all the rest of it.
Which is not dissimilar to what Jerry Brown was running on during the campaign. And one attraction of that, I thought, was the following. It would have obliterated this whole terrible class of accountants and lawyers and special tax advisors who represent a part of the economy themselves. And second, it would have ended this sort of almost tyrannical relationship people have to the, or rather the IRS has to people. People are afraid, they don't know whether they're breaking the law or not.
You get computer messages constantly from these IRS. They're written in computer form. It's not an individual writing it. You could get rid of 100,000 IRS agents, a lot of tax lawyers and accountants, all the rest of it. Put the form on one sheet of paper, the way it was. I've got a 1938 form on a single sheet of paper, and that would be it.
Now we are agreeing on something. It would be more democratic.
Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
First of all, I find it astonishing that Christopher Hitchens is actually advocating a flat tax. As somebody with his background, he should certainly know that's regressive, and actually that's what we have in this country, because the most dominant tax to the average person is not the income tax. As everybody knows, it's a Social Security tax. About 8% on the employee, about 8% on the employer, which would otherwise go to the employee, roughly about 16% per individual. I'm a Democrat, and I'm an actual, authentic Democrat. I'm a businessman. I believe that Clinton did something very courageous, and the Democrats did something very courageous by passing this bill, which redresses a serious imbalance in taxation. I don't shed one single tear for people making over $200,000 a year who might have to pay a little more in taxes. The propaganda machine, which Mr. Buchanan's a part of, that came down on this tax act and tried to spread the notion that this country was going to die as a consequence of what of the tax act. Mr. Dole saying it was the most outrageous tax in the history of the world, or something to that effect, did nothing but attempt to engender a panic in our business community, and almost succeeded. I'm happy to say that it didn't. I think that that's probably what the Republicans would like, a panic in the business community to get them back to the White House. But I think that we have to commend Mr. Clinton for his courage, and the Democrats for their courage for voting this in the face of the Rush Limbaugh panic attack.
Let me concede one thing. There's no doubt that Clinton's astonished me. He did abandon that middle-class tax cut. He said in the campaign clearly, I will not raise taxes on the middle class to pay for my programs. He broke the pledge. There is no doubt about the boldness of what he did. I was astonished that he put forward all these taxes into an environment which is really hostile to taxes. It's bold, and one thing it has accomplished, it's restored clarity to American politics that was lost with the budget deal of 1990 where Bush and the Democrats got together. So you've got Republicans are a low-tax party again, an anti-tax party, and Democrats are a high-tax party. We're going to see if it works.
Hold your comment here because we're a little behind on calls. Denver, Indiana. Go ahead, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you for allowing me to call. I am pro-Bill Clinton, mainly because he seems to be a decent Christian without being a hypocrite about it. I didn't have a problem with the Republican convention last year with you, Mr. Buchanan. I had a problem with the timing of putting Mr. Reagan on so late in the night, but nothing that you said particularly offended me. But I do have a problem with Pat Robertson and the more radical right wing of what used to be my party. The issue of public prayer in schools, for example. We've got to have public prayer in schools, or prayer in public schools, excuse me. It's a burning issue with those people, and yet when I open my Bible and I read Matthew 6, the person who founded my church, Jesus Christ himself, tells me that people who pray in public, whether it's in the church or on the street corners, are hypocrites. We're supposed to pray in private, in the closet. God, hearing us in secret, rewards us openly. The same thing with donating money to the church in public. And yet a couple of months ago, I turn on the TV and Pat Robertson's on TV begging for money for the church. People like that, him and Jerry Falwell, I never see him in a suit that looks like it costs less than $1,000. And yet Jesus Christ himself tells me it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to get into heaven.
Hold on a second. Mr. Hitchens, any response?
I was waiting for the pro-Clinton element in this, but I mean, I don't know where to begin. Well, I have no quarrel with him about Pat Robertson or about prayer in the schools. I think that what is interesting to me and what I think is revealing is that it's the schools they want the prayer in. If people said there should be prayer on the planes or prayer in the trains or prayer in the workplace, everyone would say, well, you know, you're invading our privacy. Of course they want it to be, while they still can have impressionable minds. And I think that clearly exposes the totalitarian character of Christian fundamentalism. But
you want to defend,
I don't see what this has to do with the Clinton administration.
I think what it is a lot of, what they want is voluntary prayer in the public schools, voluntary Bible instruction. And what they want is a lot of parents want their children educated in the convictions in which they were raised, and the beliefs they were raised, and the traditions they were raised, and the religion they were raised. And since public schools are mandatory, and since they take enormous amounts of money, they feel that a compromise, and a legitimate compromise, is voluntary prayer and voluntary Bible instruction to public schools, and I agree with them 100%. One point, Ronald Reagan got on immediately after me. The problem was that I went on 30 minutes late because a lot of the speeches before me went over. Some of the 5-minute speeches went 7 minutes, 7-minute speeches went 10 minutes. But he came on just a couple of minutes after me.
Riverview, Florida. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Brian, I'm sitting here mesmerized. This is a great show this morning. And Mr. Buchanan, I've looked up to you for a long time, and I realize that there's a lot of people out there that are left-leaning socialist, and they hate to hear anything that you have to say, but the truth hurts a lot of times. Basically, I'm a small business person, and the guy that called a while ago and said that he owned a business. How in the world could anybody who owns a business think that the Clinton tax plan is good? And especially anyone who would think that they're going to be taxing the rich. I own a small business, and I'm passing everything on to the consumer. And I will continue to do that until I go out of business, and I can't, I can't get the prices that I have to stay in business, which is very possible.
How many employees do you have?
We have 6.
Do you buy health insurance for all of them?
I buy it for myself. I can't afford it. If they pass the Hillary Clinton plan, we're all out of business.
All right, thanks. What about, let me ask Mr. Hitchens about the mandated employer, possibility of employers having to insure everybody that works for them, like this gentleman.
The Clinton health plan is a complete fraud from start to finish. The fact is that everybody knows that there's only one possible solution to this problem, which is to have national health service and single-payer system.
Like
And
Canada?
everyone, yes, at least like Canada. And everyone who's been asked, and every time they have been asked, has come up with a pretty unanimous finding on that. And that's the only option that the Clinton task force, as it used to call itself before it was rather surreptitiously disbanded, said it would not consider.
The so-called Hillary tax on small businesses, 7 to 10% of payroll, would be a total disaster. It would kill this man's business. And I've talked to others, small businesses. It would really cripple the small business community. They're the ones, Brian, who have created all the jobs in the Reagan era. They're creating all the jobs right now as Xerox dumps 10,000 onto the market, General Motors downsizes, IBM lets go 100,000 over a decade. It is small business that's going to save this country economically, that's the cutting edge of technological change. And if the Republican Party's got any sense, they will go for repeal of Clinton's taxes.
Federal Way, Washington, you're next.
Good morning, Brian.
Hi.
Brian, I got to take a little umbrage with you because you seem to be having too much fun with the imbalance, okay? And as chief executive officer of that network, I would like you to take off Robert Dole, Republican leader, and give him his real title. The same thing with Michaels, all right? Because you give the Republican parity right there. And when I listen to the EIB network, they refer to listen to C-SPAN, and it seems like you are conjoined in the propaganda machine. It may not be so, Brian. That's the way it's coming across.
Let me wait. Let me just get 2 cents in here. Every single time Bill Clinton says anything anywhere in this country that we can get a camera there, we carry it. How much more can we carry from Bill Clinton?
Well, look at your show this morning. You know, it's laughable.
I understand. I understand.
You know, you say you're striving for balance.
I understand.
You've been striving for balance for a year.
Sir.
Okay.
I understand.
Here, Brian.
Listen, let me ask you again. If the president, every time the president wants to say something, he can be heard here in its entirety on this network, how much more can we do? This is a mistake this morning. Neither one of these gentlemen had anything to do with it. I apologize to you in the audience. That's why we changed the call so we could hear from you.
All right, but you're changing horse in the middle of the stream. You know, last show I tried to catch you, I couldn't get on. When you sat there for an hour with the guy from that wrote the book against Anita Hill, and you lambasted her for 45 minutes under the guise of Ginsburg, talking about Ginsburg. You did it again with Warren Hatch. Well, you weren't the producer on that show, but I tried to get in on that one. All right, I see you give parity to the minority leaders right now, and as for Pat Buchanan, I can't see how he could be a Catholic and a Republican. Perhaps he should reread the Spiritual and Corporal Works of Mercy.
What do you mean by parity, by the way?
Well, when you call Robert Dole a Republican leader when he's the Senate a minority leader, all right, he doesn't deserve the title when he's ahead of that when he's in the Senate, and neither does Bob Michaels. And any place, C-SPAN is the only one that does it. All right. Now that when the people from EIB come here, they don't see that they have the minority view. They see that they have a equal view. And to me, that's propaganda.
Do you think
that's no longer reporting?
Let me ask you, though, but Bill Clinton won the last election. How much impact did that have on the election? The Democrats have been in power here since 1955 or whatever.
No, they haven't. No, they haven't.
I'm talking about the Congress.
That might say there's people that say they're Democrats that aren't. All right, and you got the Bo Weevils in the House right now that vote against everything Clinton does.
I know you're
a black man. I know what the Bo Weevils mean to me, and they don't mean democracy to me.
I understand.
They don't mean Democratic Party.
I understand what you're saying, but I don't understand why it's so the Republican leader thing. Why that upsets you so much?
Because it's a subliminal suggestion to someone that this view is shared by more than actually is.
You know,
it's not the truth.
Okay.
You know, I'm glad he knows what the Spiritual and Corporal Works of Mercy are. Most Catholics forgot that long ago, Brian. I bet he's my age.
Do you have any comment? He's still on the line.
He's pre-Vatican II.
Well, actually, yeah, I do. I don't see why you should apologize for having me on. I'm rather offended.
I'm not apologizing for having you on. I'm really not. We made a mistake in the balance here.
I don't see what the mistake is. I don't see it. And I think balance is a ludicrous
concept. Now you've even got the guest mad at me. I mean, what can we say? Caller, what?
I think balance is a ludicrous concept anyway.
He's gone.
It would be absurd to expect in any battle of ideas for people to come out in some sense 50-50. The point about the battle of ideas is it should be dialectical, to coin a phrase, and that there should be argument. Now, what you usually get with balance is you get one moderate Republican versus one moderate Democrat on most shows most of the time, and they're all members of the permanent consensus. That's what people should be protesting about.
Well, I think we make a mistake by using the word balance. What we really want to do here, and what we try to do, is let the audience hear as many different ideas as is possible. That's why I keep bringing up the fact that everything Bill Clinton says is heard here. I mean, this show here isn't that important in the grand scheme of things. What's important is that you be able to hear every possible idea that comes out of this town that we can physically get on the network.
I don't have a chance of not knowing what Clinton thinks.
Well, I do think Chris represents a left point of view, which is very dissatisfied with Clinton, almost as much for different reasons as the right is.
I should tell the audience, those folks out there that are upset with us this morning, that Hendrik Hertzberg will be our guest next Monday on this show, who is, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think it's fairly obvious that he's a very strong supporter of Bill Clinton. He runs the New Yorker magazine. Let's go to New York City next. You're in favor of Bill Clinton, we understand?
Yes, I am.
All right, let's hear it then.
I don't think, I am 58 years old. I have voted in every election. I'm from New York City, college educated, and sorry, Mr. Hitchens, I am an attorney. I don't think in all of the I don't think in all the presidential elections that I have seen up to this point in my life, and I do remember the Roosevelt years, have I seen a president lambasted in the press the way that I have seen this president. We are 6 months into an election. You have made a huge argument out of playing a haircut on a runway. Now, you mean to tell me Reagan never did that, or Bush never did that, and you mean to tell me that...
Ma'am, if you think that Bill Clinton got hit hard, you should have been in Richard Nixon's White House from about 1973 March to 1974 August.
But he deserved it.
No, he doesn't think so.
He doesn't think so, and you may not think so, but I didn't make tapes of people talking.
But
he did. I didn't use the kinds of language that he used. He did. I didn't bring down his presidency. He did. You can say all the things that the press was against him, and we have this liberal media establishment. I'd like to see it. We have Rush Limbaugh. We have you now. We have Crossfire, which is you and Mr. Sununu. I would like to turn on a radio and...
You're being unfair to Kinsley.
Oh, no. I'm saying Kinsley, and I can't think of the NBC guy from Meet the Press.
Tim Russert.
Tim Russert, right, exactly. Now, please, this man is 6 months into a presidency. He has a very, very hostile Congress. Whether or not you can say Democratic Congress, Democratic president, I'm not sure that's...
But why?
Let me finish for a minute. I'm not sure that that's a fair characterization. When Senator Nunn doesn't support his president, then I'm not sure, because he's from Tennessee. And if you wouldn't go with a BTU tax because of the oil interests of Senator Boren. Now, I watched those debates.
But, ma'am, why did President Reagan succeed with the Democratic House in getting his program through in 1981, and President Clinton, who's got a Democratic House and Senate, come so close to failure? I think the answer is two things. One, Reagan's leadership.
I'm glad
and second, the effectiveness of Ronald Reagan's ideas. People believed in him. They don't believe in these ideas.
Well, let me tell you something. The reason Ronald Reagan got his programs through was very simple. There were very high interest rates. The country wanted all of this military equipment. Now we first find out, 12 years later, this SDI stuff is a bit itchy. I'd like to know the hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars that put us into debt with.
It's only about
that
32.
Could never have worked.
It was $32 billion.
Circumstances could have never worked.
It worked with the Russians.
Got to let you go. Grab a call from New York City. Hold on, Christopher Hitchens, you're next. Go ahead, please.
Did you say a call from New York City?
I made a mistake. It's Cleveland, Ohio.
Yes, right. You know, Brian, actually, you could have just dialed up there to Martha's Vineyard, to any one of those press people if you wanted somebody on Clinton's side. I can't believe this baloney that's been going on today. A few weeks ago, you had Kondracki and Stephen Roberts on this show. Then a few weeks after that, you had Andrew Sullivan and Clarence Page. Now, come on, give me a break. So I can't understand this anyway. I don't even care about it, but I want to bring up something else, and that is Janet Reno. I have been increasingly disturbed that Janet Reno is turning into a stage prop for Clinton. Every time you turn around and he's putting on one of those silly little shows where he brings out all the White House people in these chairs and he makes some silly little announcement and everybody's applauding, and there's that Gore gazing fondly at his Bill Clinton, just like Nancy Reagan used to do, you know. I wondered who would get to do that. And there he is, and leading the applause and everything. And there's Janet Reno. Now, I thought, well, he's just dragging everybody in he can in Washington who will applaud. But they had that press conference about Vincent Foster. This was at the Justice Department. She wasn't there. Who conducted this was that Heyman, the assistant, and two of the most incompetent people. After watching the Twin Towers press conferences, you know, the FBI guy in New York and the chief of police in New York, such professionals, such wonderful information they gave out. Then you have this stupid, it was like the original amateur hour. Where was she?
Thanks. Mr. Hitchens.
So I don't get my chance on...
You do.
On the tax consensus and
Answer
the
and
bipartisan racket.
Go to that.
Because I have no opinion about Janet Reno at all. I mean, she does look like Clinton clone to me, yes, and I hate these press conferences where everyone looks moistly at the president and so on. And I hate everything about the spin control system in Washington, and I loathe the packaging. And I think that the woman who rang before, actually the same one, said, how dare the press go on about Air Force One holding up the traffic and so on. I mean, what did we get out of that? We got David Gergen as Clinton's public face.
He's my old colleague.
So, yeah. And it shows, if you don't mind my saying so. So, the face to watch is the face, it seems to me, of Lloyd Benson. I mean, when Clinton picked him to run the Treasury, you knew at once what sort of regime this was going to be. And if you want to look back at the calamitous budget of '81, the one which David Stockman, easy mistake, David Gergen sold, and David Stockman, who designed it, admitted was a fraud, was a political use of insolvency to try and destroy the Democratic Party and try and trap the Democratic Party in a spending box. That was only possible in the Senate because of people like Lloyd Benson. The Democrats got that budget through for Reagan. And it was the Democrats who did the savings and scandal. And it was the Democrats who, on the Judiciary Committee, who made Clarence Thomas a judge. And it was all of these things. And you still get people ringing up saying that the press is partisan against the Republicans or the Democrats. People still believe that there is a healthy two-party competition.
We've got to move to the next call. I want to ask you, what time today can people continue to listen to this all-day show?
We'll be on from 12 to 3 on Mutual Broadcasting, Westwood One's 122 stations. I'm not sure which one in any particular area.
12 to 3 this afternoon, East Coast time. Memphis, Tennessee. Go ahead, please.
Yes, sir. I'm calling because I have a problem with the perception that Ronald Reagan and George Bush were the presidents of the military branch of Americans who want to serve this country. I served under President Reagan and also under President Bush during Iran-Contra and also the Iraq-Gate incident. And my problem is that while we were overseas supposedly serving and defending the country, they were selling arms to our enemies, in essence, the Iran-Contra incident and also the Iraq-Gate incident. I was in Beirut, Lebanon, when the Marine Corps and Navy personnel were annihilated by a bomb under the Reagan administration. And I support Bill Clinton for the point that I just want a departure from the rhetoric where we say that we're national defense and we're for the service members and such like that, and behind closed doors we sell arms to the enemies of this country, in essence. And
thanks.
He's exactly right with regard to the sale of weapons to the Ayatollahs of Iran. It was utterly foolish to think we were dealing with moderates. It was a contradiction of what we'd been saying publicly we were doing. It was wrong, and it was
when did you change your mind on that?
Oh, I've always said that the sale of the weapons to the Ayatollah was wrong and a horrible mistake. What I do think is once we got the money from him, sending the money to the countries, I have no problem with that.
I remember you making a speech in Lafayette Square in defense of Oliver North, saying if North was clever enough to figure out how to take the Ayatollah's money and give it to the Contras to kill Nicaraguans, it was fine by you.
What I said...
I'll never forget the speech as long as I live.
Well, he wasn't in Lafayette Park. He was down in Miami, and I said if he did rip off the Ayatollah and sent the money to the Contras, I'm glad that's where the money went. But as for the sale of weapons to the Ayatollah, the caller is exactly right.
Palm Beach, Florida. Go ahead, please. Hello, Palm Beach. Hello, Palm Beach. Are you there? Where are you calling from, please?
Kansas City, Missouri.
Kansas City. You're on the air.
Hello.
Go on. You're on the air.
Okay, what I'd like to say is that when you start talking about conservatives and liberals and all that, and why people like Clinton and why people don't like Clinton, you're not even talking about a representative portion of this country. You're talking about people that voted, which probably make about 25% of the people. When people say they don't like Clinton, sometimes they're saying they don't think he's doing enough. That don't mean that they're conservative. That means they're going more liberal. Also, when Clinton came out and started talking about people needed jobs, the media jumped on him real quick. They talked about we need to reduce taxes, forget all that. 1 month later, they turned around and said, they were saying everything was all right at first. Then a month later, they turned around and saying, there weren't any jobs. What's going on? To me, it sounds like whenever they start talking about people that are working, they forget it. When they start talking about people with money, then it becomes a problem.
All right. We're going to let that stand. We're behind on calls, so I'm going to grab Joliet, Illinois. Go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm scared to death, so hang in there with me.
Don't be. We're all getting beat up
This
this
is Robert
morning.
Novak's hometown, I believe.
Excuse me?
That's Robert Novak's hometown, isn't it?
I didn't know that. I'm native Chicagoan. I'm just living out here because that's where we work. Anyway, there's 2 points. In Reader's Digest this month, there was a statement. It was an excerpt from a Washington Post article, and it says basically Clinton lies. Let's get that one on the table and dismiss it. The second thing is I'm a lifelong conservative Republican. I had lunch the other day with a lifelong conservative Republican lawyer. He voted for Clinton. I voted for Perot. I am now working actively for a black liberal Democrat. We just want the good guys and the bad guys. We've got to get rid of the labels. There are no more conservatives or liberals, Republicans or Democrats. There are law-abiding people and people who don't obey the law. There are people who are willing to work and people who aren't. And when the politicians get that point, we might have a chance.
All right, thanks. One more call, and then we'll get back to our guests. Omaha, Nebraska, go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Hi.
Brian, you haven't had a journalist who strongly supported Clinton since he's been elected, and to pretend you didn't know this was going to be Mr. Hitchens' position is kind of a joke since he's been on since the election and has not had a single good thing to say about Clinton, not on Comedy Central either. Mr. Hitchens, Clinton quit talking about the middle-class tax cut right after the New Hampshire primary. So to say he played it every day, twice a day during the campaign is incorrect. And of all of those I know who voted for Clinton, we did not vote. I know of no one who voted for him on the basis of a $300 tax cut. If that had been our criteria, most of us would have voted for Bush's 1% across-the-board tax cut. I voted for Clinton hoping he would drop the tax cut because by election time it was clear we could not afford it. And the earned income tax credit for the working poor was more important to me. And Clinton did not say he would not raise taxes on the middle class to reduce the deficit. He said he would not raise taxes on the middle class to pay for his programs, which he is not doing. And Rush is a problem for Clinton only because the press has abdicated their responsibility to the likes of Rush. When the press has only accurately informed 23% of the American people about the impact of the tax increases and 68% of the public is grossly uninformed, that is a failing grade for the press by anyone's standards. And Rush is perfect for paranoid white males and women who know their place. And this network, like all other call-in programs, has been taken over by these callers with this Koresh-like attachment for Rush, who are desperate to appear to be the majority. They can't even see when they're being used and abused, used to help Rush protect his own, and then screwing his followers for $3 per minute to call his 900 feedback number.
But, you know, caller, the reason Rush has got an audience is because a lot of people believe what he says and they agree with what he says. Now, Bill Clinton did say, I will never raise taxes on the middle class to pay for my programs. That tax on gasoline is directly on the middle and working class, and the tax on Social Security recipients above $32,000 is directly on the middle class. Also, Bill Clinton didn't tell the truth. George Bush said, listen, we figured out your program, and it means you're going to have to tax folks all the way down to $36,000 to get something. And they all said that was a big lie, and it turns out it was the exact truth.
Marietta, Georgia, you're next.
Yes, good morning, Brian.
Hi.
Pat, it's nice to talk to you.
Good to talk with you.
I am pro Bill Clinton. I do agree with some of your points with NAFTA. I disagree with some of your social positions. But we have a working president. I think you have to admit that.
That's right.
And I think that one of the better things on C-SPAN is after, say, the Forestry Summit or his economic summit, the open mic at the end of the program, to hear these people talk about the president and how he's trying. And, you know, they've never heard somebody this articulate before. As far as these small business people calling in, you know, with their restaurants or dry cleaners, and they're talking about they're not going to hire people with this new tax plan. They're minimum wage jobs, Pat. We don't want those jobs. We need good jobs in this country.
But, you know, how can they create jobs if you take away their profits in taxes of small business, my friend?
Let me ask Mr. Hitchens to jump in here on this. You've been very patient this morning.
I thought the lady before was very good about the Limbaugh factor, but I thought that her energy and passion were wasted on Clinton. I thought that it was he doesn't deserve the support of someone who's as smart as that. Who did you like
in the primaries?
I would have been very strongly in favor of Jerry Brown.
Jerry Brown?
Yeah.
How about, I asked you earlier about the liberal talk shows. Are there any?
I think there's a lot of liberal populist talk shows. Yeah, I think there are some around. Sure.
Can you name him?
Not that.
Is Jerry Williams? I used to be with me on RC. He's up in Boston. There are a number of them in Boston. It's fairly evenly balanced.
I don't want to. I better be careful. I think Jerry Williams was pro-Perot.
Look, I mean, the fact
he was very anti-Dukakis.
I know he was because we carried his show here on the day of the election when they read the
poll. 72, he was very pro-McGovern. Very pro-McGovern in 1972.
It's very simple. There is no one has a regular spot on a major TV show or a major op-ed page who has politics that are to the left of, say, Walter Mondale. People with left positions like my own just do not have a regular slot on American.
But, you know,
I shouldn't be self-pitying about it because, after all, Mr. Buchanan very sweetly asked me on his radio show today.
The truth is,
I myself am on occasionally, and I don't want to seem whining about it, but the fact is the left position, quite a lot of Americans hold, is not represented in the mass media at all.
But, you know, you go to California. Michael Jackson, it's very balanced in California, but I'll tell you this, Chris, this is, for conservatives see this is, or men of the right see this as our way around the op-ed pages of the Washington Post. For example, it goes from, maybe it doesn't go to your left, but it doesn't go beyond Charles Krauthammer and the neoconservatives either on the right side, nor does the New York Times. And these radio shows are the way the conservatives make an end run around the big establishment media in this country. And this is a free market on these radio shows.
How many shows do National Review contributors have now on public broadcasting? It seems like 3 or 4 to me. Charles Krauthammer is a person that's quite hard to outflank on the right. It used to be...
I've managed to do it.
Meg Greenfield would also have on that page William Buckley and Emmett Tyrrell.
But they're over in the Washington Times now.
Now they're going over the Washington Times. It's true, but there's no liberal replacement.
St. Louis.
Coleman McCarthy?
No.
St. Louis, thank you for waiting.
Mr. Hitchens, socialism didn't work. Do you need a lead balloon to fall on your head? Vietnam, Cuba, Russia, they're all begging money from us because that system took away their personal freedoms in the name of the big brother government. It robbed them of their individual creativity. The Canadians, with their single-payer system, guess where they come for their open heart surgery and that sort of stuff? They come down here. Are we going to go to Mexico with the single-payer system?
No, that's been disproved many, many times in the case of the Canadians. It would take, I mean, I'll have to refer you. There's a very good study of this actually coming out that Jessica Mitford is writing in California, comparing this Canadian question, the myth of Canadians rushing across the border for surgery.
For heart surgery?
Yeah. I mean, the Canadian system is not ideal, but it's a huge improvement on the shambolic, chaotic, shameful system that we have here, where a lot of people don't have any coverage at all.
Last call, Tampa, Florida.
Yes. Hello, Brian.
Hi.
Brian, there's been some criticism of you and your program this morning. I find that, and I've been watching you for several years, and I tune you in every chance I get. I think you run a fair program, and I just want to say that. I'm a retired businessman, and I must say that when Ronald Reagan came in the 80s, I had 3 laundromats that I was running, and the tax rate that I was paying, I couldn't believe it, how much money they had cut my tax. And my problem with it was that at the time I knew the government was running a deficit, and I thought to myself, this is stupid, because as a businessman, I have to watch my debt. Being in the laundry business, you have to buy equipment and so forth. And for the next 3-4 years, I made a fantastic amount of money out of my laundromat. But in the meantime, the debt is rising and rising and rising, and I was worried about it constantly, about our national debt. The only thing that I really like about Clinton is that he has focused in on the problem. The Republicans, somewhere or another, don't care about the national debt. You guys have never talked about it over the years, except for a few people here and there would talk about it. But nobody has ever talked about the national debt until Clinton come along, and now Perot.
All right, thanks, sir.
Well, look, the Democratic Party has controlled the House of Representatives, which has the power of the purse, as you pointed out, ever since 1956. And they have collaborated in every single spending scheme. If there's one criticism that's valid of the Reagan administration throughout, it is we did not use the veto power consistently and regularly to cut back the spending. Ronald Reagan wanted to cut back too many deals.
You should get that book, The Education of David Stockman, that William Greider wrote. It's a collection of really, it's interviews with Stockman, giving away the secrets of what the poverty and deficit trap really consists of.
Christopher Hitchens has an article in this month's Vanity Fair, Michelle Pfeiffer on the cover. And he also has a new book out, published by Verso Publishing. Where are they from?
It's the imprint of New Left Books in London originally, and it's distributed here by Routledge.
And you can hear both of our guests today, Mr. Buchanan and Mr. Hitchens, on the mutual broadcasting system around the country about 12 noon today, East Coast time. Is Mr. Hitchens going to be with you all week?
No, he's here today, and we'd like to have him on representing a left point of view, just as you have here today.
There's a little item in U.S. News this week that says that Nancy Reagan tried very hard to get a hold of the White House and the President during the budget thing to register her opposition, and that she couldn't get through. She's too busy.
She couldn't. She tried to register opposition to the tax bill.
To the budget bill. It's right here in U.S. News.
I'm astonished that she could not get through.
And it says that she called the regular number, and she said later on, however, the lines were jammed, and then she called Bob Michael and expressed her concern to him.
We'll get Gergen working on that right away.
Yes, I mean, she obviously was consulting the wrong astrologer. I would have predicted that she'd get through, I must say. That was just as well she didn't ask me.
Christopher Hitchens is a native of Portsmouth in Hampshire. What do you call it? The divisions in the country of... County Hampshire in England. And Patrick Buchanan, who's a native of Washington, D.C. Our guests, thank you all very much. And to our audience, thanks for your patience and have a good week.